may know, and obviously Ken, you know very well, we've got a selection of work here from your entire career. We have a beautiful work over here from your studio view, which you told me the other day was from your very first exhibition, and we have a brand new set of work on this wall that the exhibition is named after. Just to get us started, Ken, I thought maybe you could comment on what you've seen in the time between that work and these works in terms of how have things changed as an artist for you?
Look, first of all, this is a fantastic gallery. I've had exhibitions in lots of regional galleries in Australia. Nothing compares to this particular gallery. It's really fabulous, and it's an opportunity for us to show some quite large paintings, so I'm very pleased about that. To answer your question, what's changed between that first painting and, say, these current ones? Well, I don't know. Am I any better? Who knows, you know? Art's always half a conversation. It's what you bring to it. It's what you feel about it. There are absolutely no rules. There's some interesting paintings here that I haven't seen for a while. There's one painting, it's the second painting on this wall here, and it's been described by one particular critic as the most blasphemous painting in Australian art, which I take as a great compliment. It's a picture of my wife as the Madonna, but instead of the child, it's our dog Spot. He was a wonderful dog. I mean, he deserved to be there. He was just as important, I think, as any Madonna. Spot is a lovely, lovely dog. I was just suddenly thinking about Spot. He became quite famous in Japan, where they called him Mr. Spots. We did a television commercial here in Australia, but it was for the Japanese market, where he had to walk across a little waterway, and because every time walk across the rocks, across a little waterfall, his paws would make a mark on the thing. And so there's a lady at the other end who would clean off the rocks so that he could do the clean walk. And when we finished the shoot, they made him be first in the line for lunch, and they cooked him a special teriyaki steak. Look, in truth, he never got over it. He was always looking for the film crew. Somewhere there'd be a film crew.
And Spot appears in a few pieces in this exhibition, doesn't he?
Yeah, Spot turns up every now and then, you know. He ended up, there was a lovely exhibition in the National Portrait Gallery of artists and their pets, and four of our dogs appeared. You never imagined that your little dog gets me end up in the National Portrait Gallery. Anyway. Okay, I can control myself. These four paintings here, quite interesting. So again, somebody wrote, my work was too bright, too hedonistic for a fine art world that puts a higher premium on pain and agony. It's a comment really about sometimes artists take themselves very seriously. And, you know, there are a lot of, or there are some art institutions who would never use the word pretty or decorative, where I think they're very nice words. I think pretty, if someone says that's a pretty painting, well, I'm very pleased with that. So, for instance, this painting here is called Trying to Paint at the End of a Hot Day. Interesting picture. The best part of the picture for me is the palette. And this often happens when you're painting, you're working, you're date off and doing the best you can. And you look down in the corner where you've been mixing the paint, and it's much more beautiful than anything else that's on the things. Look, I'm sure all of you paint or you have kids. If you have kids, I mean, you'll never own anything better than a 5-year-old child will do. I'm not nearly as good as a 5-year-old child. I'm much better than an 8-year-old, but five are absolutely unbeatable, you know? They just paint or draw with such freedom that you wish you could find that again. I'm almost 85, so it's be a long time since I could even remember what it's like to be a 5-year-old.
I've got a question I've been meaning to ask you, Ken, about it. It's in some of the works with Spot, actually, and as well as the piece here and our hedonistic piece. Your version, your sort of self-portrait of yourself, you tend to be a sort of disembodied head. He appears a lot, and I was just curious about that.
Sure. Like I've got another picture going in the Archibald Prize. The Archibald Prize is a bit like it's a half between Melbourne Cup and Cracker Night. You never know. You never know when you get when you are hung, which I have been a few times. You think the judges have great taste and understanding. When you're not, it wouldn't know good painting if it fell off the wall and hit them on the head. But all artists feel that. What else were we talking about? We were talking about
your disembodied head. Your disembodied head appearing.
Oh, my disembodied head. Yeah. Well, there's a big head that I put in this year, and I hope that they choose it. But there's so many entries now in the Archibald Prize, and it's it works because Australians kind of like to see pictures of people they kind of know, and make a judgment from that. Whereas mine, you know, it's a big head, a bit all over the place, a bit of a rough head, but you know, I got a bit of a rough head sometimes. Looking at this picture, this is a painting for the first Sheridan sheets that we did, the duvet covers. And people respond and remember that a lot. I think it might have, I don't know when it came out, quite a long time ago. Do you remember, Camilla? Mid-80s. But it made a big difference to people's rooms, the duvet covers, suddenly. And people remember them a lot, and they remind me of them, which I'm always very flattered about. In a big gallery like this, and this is an amazing space, we can show some big pictures that we haven't shown before. And some pictures kind of should give you some clues of how they're painted. There's a painting over there, it's called Big Postcard from the Great Barrier Reef. You can clearly see some marks are made slowly, with some thought. Other marks are made really fast. I can't even think about how I did it, but you have the thought in your mind, like at the end to put those big stripes along the front of it. Well, you have to do that in quite a muscular way, and you have to risk buggering up everything that was there before. But that's part of the excitement too. Okay, that first is painting down there in the middle, which is the first view of the studio. We have it. It's called The Cabin. We live in Chinaman's Beach. It's the first big painting that I did from the cabin. It was 1980, my first exhibition. I was 40, which was quite old for a person of the first exhibition. It was priced at $1,500. No one bought it. No one bought it. Even though a few paintings sold, but you have to remember anyway, in time, your first exhibition, your uncle's going to buy something, the local butcher's going to be people you know. Like for the first 3 or 4 exhibitions, you can rely on people you know. After about the fourth, you know, they might come from anywhere, and I've had now more than 100 exhibitions, so I guess there's been enough other people. Anyway, it was $1,500. No one bought it, and about a week later, a guy called me up. He was a publisher in Sydney, nice bloke, he's dead unfortunately, offered me $1,000 for it. I needed the money, and so I sold it to him for $1,000. We bought it back for $30,000, maybe 10 years ago. So we won't be selling it.
You were telling us when you met the team about these 4 beautiful large pieces down the end from Japan. Would you like to tell us a little about
Okay,
those?
yeah, I had a big exhibition in Japan. It was called the paintings were called Walking Through the Cabin Garden, and so it was walking through our garden, looking at the various things, big morning glories, big frangipanis. I think there was about 14 of them when they were first done. And they were in a very, very beautiful building in Tokyo called the Sugetsu School of Flower Arranging. Now, in Japan, they take flower arranging to an amazing degree, and the guy who was the head of the school had made a big arrangement to, I guess, to welcome me there. It's half a tree. It's big. It's not just a flower in a vase, although it can be that, but it's done with great taste and understanding. And the building itself, it had 14 large squares, large windows at the top, and so I made the paintings exactly the same size as those spaces in respect to that room. It should be an Australian tradition. On any anniversary, buy Kendone painting, or even a print. I'd be quite happy with that. I mean, Judy and I are coming up to our 60th wedding anniversary, so. That's an achievement. When we first met, Judy had jet black hair. You see her hair now, totally white. That's what you get for being married to me for
Speaking of Judy and your family more generally, you do have a sort of a collaborative relationship with your family. You've done a lot of design work with them and Judy and your daughters.
Look, it's one of our greatest joys, I think, that as a family we do work very closely together. I work very closely with Camilla. Like when we first started off, I made 12 T-shirts to give to the press, drawing of Sydney Harbour. The woman called Marion von Adelstein worked for Vogue. She wrote a very nice piece that said, you can hang a don on yourself or a don on the wall. There's an integrity to everything you touch. So it was a nice thing. And so we opened a little shop in Sydney, and the first few things were kind of flat things. I can do a flat thing. I can do a T-shirt, I can do a pareo, I can do a sweatshirt. Then when Judy got involved in the business, then we got into swimwear and resort wear and all kinds of things. And that led to licensing arrangements in Japan and in America. People would go back to Tokyo with a Kendone bag. And so I got a call from a bloke, a publisher in Tokyo, said, look, we've seen this name everywhere. Will you design the logo for a new magazine? It's called Hanako. That's a girl's name. Will you design the logo for it? And I said, yeah. And we made a kind of arrangement. What he meant is, would I design every logo? And would I design every cover? The magazine ran for 13 years in Tokyo, more than 1 million circulation every week. Wow. So I became quite well known in Japan because of Hanako magazine. It was a lovely thing. And because the Japanese have a great respect for the artist, and because it's my hand that wrote the word Hanako, I still get, I don't know if I get money for it, but I still get some kind of, no, small amount of money, enough to dinner in Rockhampton. But it is a bit, but I became quite well known in Japan because of that. And that led to some terrific things. And the same thing happened in America. I did the designs for Olivia Newton-John when she first opened Koala Blue. And we used to just exchange little notes back and forth, a nice girl. And then she sent me a note. She said, look, people love the little koalas. They were ridiculously cute. I mean, I could do koalas that make, young girls faint by their, by their very cuteness. I don't do it very often. I don't want to do it again, but I did it. Anyway, she said, look, the people love the koalas. We want to do it on lots of stuff. And I said, well, that's fine, but that's a business arrangement now. We have to enter into some arrangement. So the next letter came back from American lawyers. It was one of those letters where all the partners' names are down one side. And it was a rather strongly worded letter, basically, in lawyers' terms, saying, look, Olivia's not going to pay any more for it, because I'd already given it to her anyway, come to think of it. But basically that she can do what she wants with it. So I said, look, I'll give it to her. You do what she wants with it. I'm smarter now. I wouldn't have done that then. Anyway, so she went off and did that with her partner, Pat Farrar, nice couple of girls. And I got a call from a bloke and he said, Ken Dones, yes. He said, I hear you did the koalas for Olivia. I said, yeah, I did that. He said, I've got some shops in America. He said, do you do bunnies? Bunnies are very big in California. So I sent him a couple of drawings like koalas with longer ears, He was a lovely bloke. Anyway, he came back and he said, Ken, they're walking out the door. He said, do you do Scotty dogs? I said, I don't do Scotty dogs. I said, anyway, if you want to work it, I said, you better come to Australia and we'll have a meeting. Anyway, he came to Australia. He was a very tall guy. Because I said, he was staying in the old region. I said, how will I recognise you? He said, I'm tall. He was very tall. And we entered into an arrangement with him that led to this stuff being in Neiman Marcus, in Bloomingdale's, in a lot of America's like a really big ball. It's hard to get it rolling, but once you start, it sort of has a life of its own. And then people wanted me to do logos for American cities. So I designed an alphabet that's kind of looked a bit like California. And once you have that alphabet, you can do Santa Monica, Santa Barbara, all of those kinds of cities. That's easy enough to do, which I did. Then they wanted me to do other cities moving further west. Yeah, west. East. East, thank you. I'm an appalling speller. And I started to do this, and I got to the word Albuquerque. Albuquerque is absolutely impossible for anybody to spell. Certainly impossible for me to spell. I said, I know, we're not going to do this anymore. So that stopped that American relationship. It led to some interesting things, They wanted me to do characters for Disney. And so you go to the Disney offices, you get stopped at the front. They said, where do you need to go? I said, well, I have to go to the design department. They said, do you know how to get there? I said, no, I've never been here before. They said, well, you go down Cinderella Avenue, you turn at the Three Pigs roundabout. It's all Disney. It's all Disney. But an interesting thing to do. And I always say that I did nothing for them, but my daughter reminds me I must have done something for them, because they wanted me to take like classic Disney characters and bring something else to it. Anyhow, it was a bit of fun. You can't take it too seriously. Where are we?
One interesting request I know you got, a couple of decades ago now, was to design a series of Australian flags when Australia was looking very seriously at becoming a republic. I wonder if you wanted to talk about that, because I thought that was such an interesting project. How does it feel to be requested?
I'm not sure whether it's going to happen in my lifetime. I used to think it would. I think we're mature enough to have our own flag. I think that, I mean, the Aboriginal flag is a fantastic design, but you couldn't get enough Australians to accept that. So it has to be something else. Does it have to be the Southern Cross? Well, the Southern Cross is on lots of flags. I've come to the conclusion that if we're going to have our own flag, it probably should be a kangaroo. You can show the kangaroo. Everybody in the world knows that that's symbolising, that's Australia. That animal means Australia. You could say, well, you know, sometimes we eat them, or the destruction. You say, well, the Canadians burn their leaves all the time. It just becomes a symbol of a country. And the kangaroo is the strongest symbol that we have. But as I said, if I was the design dictator of Australia, which, you know, I'd put my hand up for that, there are certain things you could do between breakfast and lunch. First of all, you need to get the right green and gold. They never get it right. It looks like a bloody pineapple salad. The green is never dark enough, and the yellow's sometimes not strong. Rugby union get very close to it being right. But you could make that. You could say, this is the yellow, this is the green, move on. Because you don't need to think about it again. We spend too much time in other areas. What else was I talking about?
Is the new flag bound up with the Republic to you, or is that something we could do?
Yeah, you've got to have political will. Well, I've got a few versions of the flag. We fly them on our flagpole. I've got one there at the moment. It's got a yellow kangaroo on it, on blue, but it's got the Southern Cross as well. But that's two thoughts. Why do you need two thoughts? You need one singular image to represent the country, and I think it clearly is the kangaroo. What else?
Good question. A lot of people, Shanna's motioning to your poetry, and I know you mentioned that briefly last night, but maybe you wanted to speak to those new works a little bit and
yeah, look, I don't know, but I started to write some poetry, and then I started to write another one, and then another one, and then another one, because once you started to write them, it just kind of was flowing. And the way I wrote them, I want the viewer or the reader to sometimes pause between the lines. So most of the time when you see poetry, it's just written, you know, but I want to write it so there's some spaces in between the thoughts. They're all pretty self-explanatory. There's one, for instance, I used to go to school in Katoomba. I lived in Springwood. Took the train every morning. I loved train travel. Judy and I have done some very long train trips. Even Springwood to Katoomba in the morning was a wonderful way to go to school. I hated school when I got there, but getting there was great. And as you see in the poem, I talk about the unfathomable labyrinth of algebra. Algebra and I never had any relationship at all. It's too late. Algebra and I are never gonna cross our paths. So we were once in, I think Kazakhstan, I don't think the name of the town, but it's where the guy who invented algebra was born. There's a very big statue in the main street to symbolize that work. I went over and I kicked that statue because algebra and I, not good. Actually, talking about school, maybe I said this last night. No, I have to go for it again. I was talking to some school teacher last night, and we were talking about report cards, and I said I remember distinctly some of my report cards. They were a bit embarrassing. The first one I remember a teacher had written said, Ken is probably the most creative student I've had. 2 doors or 2 lines down below that, another teacher had written, rather embarrassingly, if I ever had a son, I would like him to be like Ken. In between, another teacher had written, this boy is a fool. Which I think it teaches you very early. You can't win them all. You know, there are some people who are going to think you're absolute rubbish. You can't win them all.
We could almost have that in a frame somewhere in this show, I think. I think we have time for about 3 questions.
Ken, I'm just wondering, at what point when you're creating your pieces, do you actually say that's the point to stop? Or what's the temptation to actually keep adding? And when do you go, yeah, that's enough?
It's a very good question. I love to start painting. Starting painting, big white canvas, doesn't matter as big or like I'm ready to go. But almost inevitably, it makes some changes when you go through it. Almost inevitably, it becomes something else. I'm not the kind of painter who sits in front of a particular view and tries to recreate that. Not against that at all. That's what people like to do. I like to paint the feeling of things. I mean, even this little picture here, which I think is called Model in the Backyard, the table is not mauve, the walls, it's just a game. It's a game that has an easy start and a very difficult end. At some point in time, you have to walk away from it. There's a big painting over there in the corner, a big reef painting, which says reworked. So I do rework some pictures, look at them again and decide that. Like at home where we live, there are 2 lounges, there's the television set. And on that wall, which I lie beside, is the painting. So Saturday night, we're watching Midsummer Night's Murders. I fall asleep. Judy falls asleep. I wake up. I said, who did it? I've got no idea, because we've both been asleep. And because I'm seeing the painting out of the corner of my eye, then sometimes even then, I'll take it back down to the studio or I'll put something on it. I like to live with the paintings for quite a while before I think that they're finished. And then they go to then there's a system. It goes to the gallery, it's photographed, it's recorded. And thanks to Janine, we're pretty good at that. What else?
Another one over here.
The hot weather in Rome, it captures, I've never been there, but I've read a piece about hot weather in Rome. And to me that's a very evocative and sweat-inducing a piece of art. I'm just wondering if you've got any thoughts or comments. Were you there when you painted it? Or?
Yeah, look, it's interesting you should bring up that painting. For me, it's the two paintings that have been hung together, one about Rome, one about the Bungle Bungles. And I've never seen them hung that way. I was very pleased to see them. Obviously, the intensity of the colour is true on both pictures. Yeah, I've been to Rome, but I didn't paint it in Rome. I painted it, somewhere in my head. And the Bungle Bungles, yes, the Bungle Bungles are one of the great parts of Australia. Fabulous to see. Yeah, and I've been there. There's all kinds of little clues in the painting, like even this painting. This little Chinese figure, I found it in a little kind of, in Hong Kong, a little shop. It wasn't a shop, it's like a little altar. And I said to the guy, I said, I love that little figure. He said, you could buy it. And I thought, it's an amazing religion. You can bloody buy something out of the church or something and take it away. What else?
One over here.
As someone who struggled in school yourself, piece of advice being to young people who want to be creative and want to be artistic, but are stuck in a system that not only oppresses creative arts, but at the same time has discouraged a lot of these young people and told them that they're unsuccessful because they can't do maths well, they can't do English well.
I didn't get all of the question, but I think I got enough of it. It's a very tough business. If you want to make a living out of art, it is a very, very tough business. But if you want to make paintings, if you want to just use it as enjoyment, I would recommend everybody would do it. Did I say something before about that? Maybe I didn't. Like, there are no rules. If I ever had an art school, which I'm not going to have, the first thing I would say to people, there are no rules. You can do whatever you like. It's not accountancy. You can't add it up. It's only what you can feel about it. So for younger people now in that art field, I think that's such a broader area than it was, say, in my day. I left school, I got an exemption to leave school when I was 14 to go to the art school. And more than anything, just checking with my daughter here, is ready to smack me around the head if I go into areas of political incorrectness, which I easily do. At 14, I went to art school. I wanted to see totally nude woman. Hadn't seen a nude woman up to that point in time. I was 14. I was ready. I was more than ready. And in fact, to the end of that, when you have your first life class, which I think was on a Thursday, started at 9:30, I was there about 20 to 7, and model comes in, takes off her clothes, you do a series of quick poses and slightly longer, and then towards the end of the class, it's an hour pose. And the teacher goes around the outside of the class and leans over and corrects the anatomy and things like that. Never, ever stopped by me. I was getting really worried about it because I can draw quite well. Finally, he stopped by me and he leant over so the rest of the kids couldn't hear, and he said, "Don't you think it's about time you attempted the head?" My wife's not laughing. Okay, what else?
We might do one final question. Got one right here.
With your large blue painting at the back there, but it struck me as if it was quite a different technique and style to many of your others. I wondered if you could tell me a little bit more about how you actually went about it, the techniques that you used.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting question, and I'm not quite sure how to answer it. I told you that those were shown in Tokyo in a big gallery there. I think with that particular picture, I just wanted the viewer to be immersed in blue, whatever that took. You know, there's a great painter, Yves Klein, had Yves Klein blue. So I don't know. I don't even know how I did it, but I wanted you to feel the intensity of blue. Like, I love the flower morning glory, and where we live at home, you know, there's morning glories in the garden. I like them because they grow whether you want them to grow there or not. In fact, the next picture to that blue one is a big morning glory. Yeah, I don't know, just what I did. I made it all up. Which is essentially what art is, you make it all up.
Well, Ken, it's been a delight. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today. And can we please make Ken feel very welcome? Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think I'm speaking out of place when I say you're absolutely welcome here at RMOA anytime, and I'm pretty certain you're welcome to Rockhampton anytime at all. It's been a real treat, Ken.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.